Joining us this morning on the record is Leah Cole Allen. She is a Republican candidate for Lieutenant Governor here in Massachusetts. She's our guest. It's time to go on the record this morning. She has joined forces with Geoff Diehl, standing with the conservative wing of the Massachusetts GOP. Can a Trump-endorsed ticket win in the Bay State? The candidate is with us this morning. Let's go on the record.
From WCVB Channel 5, the inside word from Washington to Beacon Hill. Today's newsmakers are going on the record.
And welcome to OTR. I'm Ed Harding, along with News Center 5's political reporter Janet Wu. It's great to have you with us on this day before July 4th, on this Sunday, July 3rd. I hope you are enjoying the holiday weekend so far. And yes, you have noticed we are outside with OTR today. WCVB has a policy that requires that everyone inside the building here in Needham has proof of a COVID-19 vaccination. Joining us this morning is Leah Cole Allen. She's a Republican candidate for Lieutenant Governor, a former state rep from Peabody. She left the State House in 2015 to pursue a nursing degree, attending St. Anselm College, becoming an RN. She is running on the ticket with Geoff Diehl. Lee, it's great to have you with us. Thank you for joining us on the record this morning. And by the way, we know it is one of the signature issues, the COVID vaccination. We know it's one of your signature issues, and I'm certain we'll get to that this morning.
Your unvaccinated status, in fact, cost you a job at Beverly Hospital. They rejected your religious exemptions and your breastfeeding arguments. Will you get vaccinated eventually, especially now that you're on the campaign trail and you're meeting lots of voters?
I do not plan to get vaccinated, and I'll tell you why. First of all, I worked throughout the pandemic. I went home every night to my baby girl at the time when there was no vaccine. And then when I became pregnant with my son, I worked on a COVID floor. Actually, the floor that I worked on was the first designated COVID floor in the hospital. I worked the front lines with COVID patients while pregnant. And then when the vaccine came out, I made a personal medical decision that the vaccine was just not right for me. And I think, part of the reason that I'm running is because I lost my job over that, because I don't feel that anybody should ever have to make the decision to be coerced into receiving a medical treatment that they don't agree with and that they don't feel is right for them and their families, or lose the livelihood to provide for their families. That's one of the signature issues of why I got into this race. And actually, when I decided to start getting back involved in politics again, I originally just wanted to come out and support Geoff for governor because I thought that he would be a great governor. We'd worked together in the past on legislative issues that were important to the citizens and the taxpayers of Massachusetts. And when I heard that he had a policy that day one, when elected, he would restore the jobs of all the state workers who were terminated over that policy, and day two, he would fire everyone who thought that was a good idea. I knew I wanted to become part of this and get involved again because it's so important that we uphold our medical freedom in this country and our bodily autonomy.
So are you saying, in other words, that you don't think the vaccine works?
I don't think the vaccine is working the way that it was intended to work, and I think that's evident by the fact that it's not stopping transmission. Over 5.5 million people in Massachusetts are vaccinated right now, and our case counts continue to tick up. We have breakthrough infections.
Isn't it reducing, though, hospitalizations and deaths?
Well, there's really no way to answer that question because we didn't have a control group, or we got everyone vaccinated so quickly as soon as the vaccines came out that we can't answer that question because we don't know what would have happened if there was not a vaccine. But I can tell you that people who are fully vaccinated and boosted are testing positive for COVID 2 and 3 times, and people that I know that are unvaccinated have had COVID and have not had severe outcomes.
Will you vaccinate your children either for COVID or other state-mandated vaccines?
No, my children are not all children are not at a high risk of adverse outcomes from COVID-19, and I choose not to vaccinate my children against against COVID-19, and I support the rights of people to choose not to vaccinate their children if it doesn't go along with their religious beliefs. And in fact, right now in the legislature, there's a bill moving through committee despite overwhelming opposition from parents in Massachusetts that would remove the religious exemption to allow their children to attend.
We want to get to some other issues as well, but I do want to ask you one last question about COVID. Do you feel that your voters that you can come in contact with, who you're pitching and hoping that they'll vote for you, know that you're not vaccinated? And do you think it's important that you let them know when you become in personal contact with them, like within 5 or 6 feet?
I think it's very well known that I'm not vaccinated. It's on my website. It's one of the things that I talk about all the time on the campaign trail. People are actually thanking me. There are so many people in Massachusetts that did not want to take the COVID vaccine, but they were forced with getting the vaccine or losing their job. And they're thanking me for standing up and having the courage to say that it's not working. And at some point, I think we need to address the fact that the technology is flawed, that it's not preventing the spread or the contraction of COVID, and we need to reevaluate these policies, because people that are unvaccinated, like myself, we're being discriminated against. We're being treated as second-class citizens. I'm not allowed to enter a building because I made a personal medical choice. We don't do that for any other communicable disease in Massachusetts. It's crazy to me that
when do you think pardon me, when do you think it's appropriate to wear a mask? Do you think it's appropriate to wear a mask on an airplane, for example?
I don't think so. I think there's plenty of studies that show that masks are minimally effective, especially the cloth masks that people were wearing and children were forced to wear in school for so long. The N95 masks have shown a bit of effectiveness, but I think that should also be a personal choice. If you feel protected by a mask, you absolutely should have the right to wear one. And if you don't think that it's going to protect you and you don't feel that you want to put yourself or your children in a mask, then you should have that right too.
Let's talk about abortion a little bit. In Massachusetts, it's going to remain legal for now in light of the recent U.S. Supreme Court ruling. State legislature is also shoring up protections for those who assist anyone from out of state and those who seek services from out of state. If elected lieutenant governor, would you try to change this?
The Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade returned the right of the states to make those decisions, because abortion is not a right explicitly enumerated in our federal constitution.
So do you think the ones in Massachusetts need to be changed?
So what I'm saying is that it returned the right to the states. Massachusetts is a state that heavily favors abortion access. I personally am pro-life. I value human life. I think human life is precious, but our government right now is working as it was intended to do. The state legislature has spoken, and while I don't personally agree with it, that's the way it is in Massachusetts.
But if you were
right
elected
now.
lieutenant governor, would you try to change it?
Well, I just said that government is working the way that it was intended to. I don't personally agree with it, but it's law in Massachusetts. The elected body has made it law, and that's the way it is in Massachusetts.
So meanwhile, the Supreme Court has also, pardon me, I don't mean to be coughing, excuse me. The Supreme Court ruling on guns could force changes in the Massachusetts concealed carry law that requires a permit from your local police chief. Do you support fewer restrictions to carry firearms outside of your home?
I think that in Massachusetts, we already have some of the strictest gun laws in the country. I don't think that we need any more. I think that the Supreme Court is, again, returning more power to the states. I think that we have a suitability clause in Massachusetts that can be argued that it's unfair to be determined whether you have a need to exercise your right. So I think that what we need to do is focus on things like funding mental health. I think we need to focus on protecting our kids in schools, making sure that we're not defunding the police. I mean, right now we have people running for office, my opponents, that want to defund the police at the same time that they wanted to make it more difficult to obtain a firearm to protect yourself in Massachusetts. And you just can't have it both ways. People have a right to protect themselves and their families.
I know you've been very busy campaigning, so I don't know if you've been watching the House hearings on January 6th, which are offering more details on what happened at the White House on the days leading to and on the day. Based on what you know right now, did President Biden win the election, number one, and number two, do you think Donald Trump acted appropriately?
I have not been keeping up with the investigations. I think everything has a right to be investigated. Sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Do you think President Biden was duly elected and that he was legally elected?
I don't know, because I haven't been part of these investigations. Some states have seen.
But as a citizen who's been reading the newspapers and just, being a voter, et cetera, do you think he was legally elected?
I really can't answer that. I don't know, because there are states that are still investigating some irregularities that they saw, and I don't have all that information.
And what about Donald Trump was part of it? Do you think he acted appropriately from what you know?
So I just reject the whole premise of this question. I think you're trying to box me into a hypothetical here. I'm here to talk about the issues that are important to the people of Massachusetts. And if we want to talk about election integrity, maybe we should talk about implementing voter ID in Massachusetts, or preventing driver's licenses for illegal immigrants. Because the way that bill is written right now, it's very likely that the Registry of Motor Vehicles won't be able to determine who's registered to vote as soon as they get a license, as is the policy right now at the registry. I think we need to be talking about things that are affecting Massachusetts right now. When I
think
go
a lot
across
of
the
voters,
state,
however,
nobody is talking about January 6th.
Well, I disagree with you. I think there are a lot of people that are talking about Trump and talking about whether he had any legal liability, if he acted appropriately, whether President Biden was legally voted President of the United States, but you just don't think you need to weigh in on those. Is that fair to say?
I don't. I think we need to be talking about the things that are important to the people of Massachusetts, things like their gas prices, things like inflation making it more difficult to get food on their table because the price of groceries and the price of everything is going up in this country. We need to talk about providing tax relief at a time when our state is awash in excess revenue. We have billions of dollars in unanticipated revenue, and yet we're still talking about raising taxes on our job creators and our wealthiest.
Well, we're going to be talking about taxes, I think, right after the pop quiz.